As the war rages against the minions of hell, strange visions torment the faithful across the globe. Men and women touched by heaven are granted visions, and revelations are made by the messengers of God. Sisters of the holy orders are marked by stigmata, and take up sword and cross as instructed by the angels. Those who have transgressed seek to atone for their sins by taking as many followers of the devil with them to the afterlife as they can. So they come, the mad and the maimed, the God-touched and the guilt-ridden, all gathering around prophets and prophetesses, forming trench pilgrim processions, disorganized groups which arm themselves and follow the prophets of the Lord unto the front lines. They fight with unrivaled zeal, throwing themselves against the heretics and arming themselves with anything that they can get their hands on, from the oldest muskets to scourges and Molotov cocktails. Pilgrims are not officially sanctioned by the Holy See, but the Church still blesses the Crusade of the faithful. Thus, the pilgrim processions are a common sight on the battlefields, often charging across no man's land in suicidal assaults against the heretics, directed by the visions of the prophets and prophetesses who lead them, and urged on by the whips of castigators who are charged with instilling the fear of God in their troops. The bulk of the pilgrims are men and women with little military training, but when they don the iron capirote of the Trench Pilgrim, they can face even a demon from the deepest bulges of hell unflinchingly. Nor is that necessarily an end to their mission. Sometimes, the seventh Metachrist will deem a fallen pilgrim worthy and bring them back as a martyr penitent, warriors halfway between heaven and earth, able to fight once more and feel no pain from bullet or bayonet thrust. Rarer and more dangerous are the Stigmatic Nuns, holy sisters who manifest wounds to match those of the third Metachrist whom the nuns venerate. They excel in close quarters combat, for each bleeding wound that they suffer makes them stronger, not weaker, as their devotions to suffering as their Lord once did gave them endurance and strength not found on mere common mortals. Armed with swords and pistols, they cross no man's land heedless of any danger, praying to sustain wounds for the Redeemer, which in turn will transform them into the very vengeance of the Lord. In front of the Trench Pilgrims are driven by the Ecclesiastic prisoners, either captured enemies of the true faith forced to make a final act of contrition, or volunteer sinners seeking redemption. Each is strapped with high explosives, which are detonated once they hit enemy lines. They dash across the killing grounds, hoping to either miraculously survive the blast and escape, or take as many followers of Lucifer with them as they can, depending on their own convictions. The most puissant of pilgrim processions will be accompanied by a shrine anchorite, a metal behemoth some 12 feet tall, a living altar of war almost completely immune to any damage. The interior of the anchorite is covered in spikes and barbed hooks, so that the monk who controls this colossus is in a constant state of torment, rejoicing in the pain, so that they can suffer as their Lord once did. In combat, they wield adamantite Catherine wheels of massive proportions, which they use to crush the sinners and heretics into a pulp, and then they string them upon the wheel as a warning to others. There is bewildering number and variety of trench pilgrim processions. The penitents of pious revenge swear in the name of Saint Olga and use flamethrowers, burning grenades, and incendiary ammunition to assail the heretics. The pilgrims of the Iron Path follow Saint Rita of Cascia, and they go to battle with hammers and mauls, maces and cudgels, and hammer nails into their heads in the memory of the saint that they venerate. The Theban Legion of Rome carries the heads of the heretics upon their standards in the memory of their patron, Saint Maurice. They fight with swords and other blades, competing with each other for the number of heretic heads they can amass. Trench pilgrims of the profession of the Sacred Affliction are known for their zeal for close quarters combat, their armour decorated with icons and shields adorned with the depictions of the saints, which, despite appearances, can withstand machine gun bullets, and the millstones they carry in order to tie them around the necks of sinners before they suffocate them in the mud and the blood of no man's land. Shrine anchorites are metal behemoths, some 12 to 15 feet tall, a living altar of war almost completely immune to any damage, with a diesel engine belching smoke and trumpets echoing with prayer. The interior of the anchorite is covered in spikes and barbed hooks so that the monk pilot is in a constant state of torment, rejoicing in their pain so that they can suffer as their lord once did. The exterior is festooned with icons, holy relics, and devotional prayer scrolls, each according to the traditions of the pilgrim sect that the anchorite serves. The first anchorites were built a long time ago in the fortress monastery of Velahrad of Greater Moravia. Several hundred of the battle machines were built under the guidance of Saint Methodius, though now the craft is lost, as the monastery was destroyed by a death commando infiltration force of the demon Marcosius. Later innovations of the engineering foundry of New Antioch created machine armor, a far smaller but more maneuverable personal protection suit based upon the anchorite design. But the pilgrim processions have neither access to these marvels of modern engineering, nor do they have any desire to give up their anchorites. They act as both fearsome engines of war as well as mobile shrines that form a focal point to the prayers and devotions of the pilgrims. The pilot, monk, or nun, once installed, never leaves the shrine anchorite until the day they die. Once they fall in battle, or, rarely, of old age, their remains are reverently removed and the body parts are preserved in reliquaries mounted upon the anchorite. Thus, each of these war machines is a testament to its own long history of war against the forces of hell. In battle, each anchorite carries a great adamantine Catron wheel, as well as an immense bonebreaker mace to bring the wrath of God upon the sinners, heretics, and apostates. In a show of piety and atonement, it is common practice for trench pilgrims or stigmatic nuns to volunteer to be broken on the wheel and serve in their final battle mounted upon this device of execution, as a sign of both their willingness to suffer for their sins and for the spiritual protection their sacrifice is said to grant to the anchorite. The church frowns upon this custom, but pilgrims flock to their anchorites on the eve of any battle, hoping to be granted the honour of perishing upon the wheel. The gods chosen are the leaders and elites of the trench pilgrims. They command the actions and demand the respect of the rest of the pious, as they can claim to stand closer to the sanctity of God's light, and to have suffered more in his name than any other. A charismatic leader and powerful fighter of the pilgrim group, the war prophet will lead a trench pilgrim procession with incredible zeal and unshakable faith. They have been touched by revelation, and are driven by visions of Armageddon, and their preaching and prophecies drive the pilgrimage from one battlefield to the next as they seek to thwart the forces of Satan and seek martyrdom in combat. War prophets know no fear and entertain no doubt, for it is certainty of the end times that they march toward, embracing what must be done with certainty and steel-like belief. The war prophet will often wear a multitude of loudspeakers, blaring holy sermons and delivering the word of the Lord and dire prophecy in equal measure. This will drive the trench pilgrim procession on with even greater fury, desperate to close the ground with the enemy and deliver them unto the Lord's most holy retribution. Castigators are tasked with instilling the fear of God in the troops. This orthodoxy officer keeps the soldiers on the path of righteousness and punishes those who transgress. They are protected by their unwavering faith as well as by the saints that they revere. Castigators cannot reach this position through anything other than twisted dual faith. First, the purest faith to leave themselves open to hear the voices of the saints, and second, the basest faith of inflicting the necessary motivations or punishment on their fellow pilgrims with the utmost authority. Finally, communicants are devotees who consume the flesh and blood of a metachrist. Strengthened by this divine essence, they grow to enormous size, and the wounds they suffer close themselves miraculously. They see clearer when blind, relying solely on their faith in the Lord to lead them through the world rather than their own lying senses, so blessed crosses are nailed through their eyes. On the battlefield, they act as line breakers and bodyguards for prophets and castigators. heedlessly walking through enemy fire and mauling their enemies with enormous weapons that a normal man could barely even lift. Trench pilgrims are truly the holy warriors of the trenches. They consider it their religious duty to make pilgrimage to the sacred battlefields to fight the heretic legions. Pilgrims wear the iron caparode to insulate their minds from the horrors of war. They are called to the holy war from all across the globe, and all walks of life. The finest of silks and the roughest of cloths have been seen marching side by side in the Trench Pilgrim processions, as people discard their former lives and families after being touched by God's holy light and murky visions of the desires of the saints. When a Trench Pilgrim falls in battle, the purest of them are often resurrected by a Metachrist to fight again as a martyr penitent. Tougher and more brutal than they were in their previous life, absolved of former sins, they are given the chance to once again die in God's holy service. Ecclesiastic prisoners are those too weak to avoid their own sins or too strong to ignore them. Some are captives, enemy combatants or civilians found wanting, while others are volunteers who are desperate to perform one meager act of heroism in the army of God as an attempt to make up for a lifetime of ruin and bitterness. Each prisoner is strapped with a bomb and will desperately sprint across the battlefield in an attempt to take out as many heretics as possible with the resultant explosion. They will pray for God's forgiveness as they crawl through mud and blood and pain, and some are so maddened by their own guilt that they wish for the hand of God to protect them from the explosion and deliver them to his countenance just to be able to do it all again. Blessed with stigmata and unshakable faith, the Stigmatic nuns are sword masters and are the vanguard of any assault by the holy armies. They are truly terrifying on the battlefield, as the wounds that they endure do nothing but make them stronger, pushing them to great feats of prowess and destruction as they douse the heretic in their holy blood and pave the way for the rest of the forces of the holy. Nobody knows why it is that some of the nuns of the holy orders are chosen to suffer the wounds of the Lord, and nobody dares to imply anything other than the obvious blessing behind such a gift.